Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of OTI's Transgender History Month podcast. My name is Shane Harris, and I'll be hosting this week's interview with Holy Old Man Bull, also known as Marcus Arana, and we're going to be talking about transgender history, community, and resilience. All right, let's jump into it. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Every day that I wake up and I'm still here, it's a good day.
Yeah, and of course, Transgender History Month is a time to remember how lucky we are to be here, to be ourselves.
I'm certain that many of us never expected to make it this far. I'm going to be 68 in 2 weeks, and I never thought I'd live this long.
Yeah, and that's a great kind of segue to our first question, which is, where were you born and what was life like there? Where did you come from and why did you leave? Why did you come to San Francisco?
Well, when you're this age, that's a pretty complicated question, but I'll try and put it in a shorthand for you. I was born in the territory of Alaska, and my mother was a native San Franciscan, and we moved here when I was 5 years old. And then my father decided he wanted us to have a hometown, small town upbringing, and he took us to Fresno. And that's where I spent my life from age 6 until I was 18 and old enough to leave. And I fled back to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and San Francisco for the trans community has really been a special place, a place that calls to people. Why did you personally choose to come to San Francisco? What made it call to you?
Well, when I returned to San Francisco, it was 1975, and I had been an out teenager since I was 15 as a lesbian. And so San Francisco, of course, drew me because it was a place that was safe for us. It was a place that was welcoming. There were services and organizations. There was the Center for Individual Responsibility. There was all sorts of politics going on. It was right before Harvey Milk ran for supervisor, and it was right before Anita Bryant and John Briggs started attacking gay school teachers. So it was a pretty fertile place to become a little baby activist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what called you to activism in the San Francisco community? What felt unique or different or special about it?
I think the fertility of where we were, there was so much going on, from lesbian rights to gay rights. Trans wasn't even invented as a word or used as a word back then. And it was a politically active and progressive town. So coming from Fresno, which was very conservative, very backwards, I may as well have grown up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a marvelous change of pace for me to not be called dyke and fag no matter where I walked or where I went. And certainly, people stopped calling me beaner, greaser, and spick. So the fact that it was multicultural, multiracial, politically progressive, and the mecca of gay culture at that time was very appealing. And my grandmother lived here, so I fortunately had a landing pad while I found my feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's so important, bringing up that idea of family, that's a complicated issue for a lot of trans people. And, what did family look like for you before you came out, after you came out? What did family mean to you?
When I tell my life story, I usually say I'm one of the lucky ones because I didn't lose my lover, I didn't lose my friends, but what I did lose was family. And the first time I came out, my mother was wonderful. I came out as a lesbian when I was 15, and she said, "Thank God you figured that out. You're going to be a much happier person and easier to get along with." And my father, who was conservative and living in Alaska and trying to climb some kind of a economic social scale, said, I don't have room in my life for a person like you. And he pretty much ignored me until I went to college in the late 1980s. So a lot of I couldn't come out to my grandparents. They were all too conservative, although I'm sure they knew. And it was tough because family was trying to force me into feminization when I was still a child. They made me wear dresses. They made me play with girl things, even though I didn't want to wear dresses and I didn't want to play with girl things. And there was no room for that in the early 1960s. So San Francisco was this wonderful, different place. Even when I would visit as a child, in the Summer of Love in 1967, as a 10-year-old, watching hippies everywhere and men in long hair and jewelry, and it was a beautiful gender blending that I had never seen in my life before. And it was the hippies that were the first ones who showed it to me.
Mm-hmm. And even now, walking in San Francisco, I feel the effects of that joy and that happiness that queer people are able to bring to the space, to bring to San Francisco. Like, even today, it still continues. And I'm so happy that you are able to find solace, find community with your mom. I'm so grateful that she was there to support you. And I want to ask, what was life like as a trans person when you first came out? Were there hard parts? Were there happy parts? We want to hear the full experience.
Well, coming out as trans, I could say which time. When I was 5 years old and I came home and told my mom I needed a blue fairy so that I could be a real boy. Was at the time in 1977 when I lived in Los Angeles and I saw a picture of Steve Dane, who had been Doris Dane, and thought, for the first time in my life, I'd seen a transmasculine person, and I thought, oh my God, it's possible. But really, it was 1994, and when I was working in San Francisco at Community United Against Violence. And we were having a staff meeting, and a coworker said, we talk about serving transgender community. We have no transgender staff members. And I kind of weakly put my hand up in the air very tentatively and said, well, I've always felt like a man inside a woman's body, but it's my karma and I've learned to live with it. People looked at me and said, okay, all right. And nothing happened. And 2 weeks later, an identical conversation in a different staff meeting took place when she said, we have no trans staff members. And this time my arm shot up in the air. And I said, yeah, you do. I'm that person. And it was wonderful because as a queer nonprofit, I had a safe place to transition. I had employers willing to give me time off to have procedures or to go to doctor's appointments or whatever I had to do to socially and physically transition. So I was really lucky in that regard. But I want to tell you, in the early 90s, there was no gender affirming care as we know it. It wasn't covered by insurance companies. It was considered cosmetic or medically experimental, even though these procedures had been done since World War I. Phalloplasty was created for soldiers in World War I. It wasn't created for guys like me. So it was a very different world in that you either had to go broke, put money on your credit card, pay out of pocket, or be very rich. Because otherwise you had to find ways to subvert. So the way that I had chest surgery done was to be a female with a bad back, which was true. I do have a bad back. In fact, it has disabled. But at the time, I was able to get 42D breasts removed under the guise of mastectomy. It wasn't a reconstruction; it was a mastectomy. But it gave me the desired effect of having a flat chest and feeling good about that. And in 2000, I needed a hysterectomy, and I was working for the city and county of San Francisco at the Human Rights Commission. And I said, it won't be paid for under my insurance policy, and that's ridiculous because if Gail needed one, they would pay for it for her. And they're right, yeah, you're right. This is discrimination. And I said, we're at the Human Rights Commission, so let's do something about it. And what we did was to create transgender health benefits for San Francisco employees, retirees, and our dependents. And that was in 2001 when it became enacted. And within 3 years, we were able to roll it into the HMOs because we had gathered enough actuarial numbers to show them it was an affordable, in fact, cheaper than many other procedures that are already covered. It was an affordable process for people. And just because you offer it doesn't mean that hundreds of thousands of people are going to flock to San Francisco wanting to get their gender reassignment paid for by the city. So it was a milestone. It was groundbreaking, and because the insurance companies had to change it for the city and county of San Francisco, they had to change it all across the country because they couldn't have exclusions in one part of the country, not having them in another.
Mm-hmm. You know, giving people the access to grow is so important, especially when being transgender is such a big part of every trans person's life.
Well, I have to say that I didn't do it on my own. It took a great collective of people who had been trying since the mid-90s to get it done, but there wasn't the political will and the money to get it done until when we did get it done. So I had the help of all of those who came before me and all of those who worked side by side with me to make sure that this thing happened. I'm just really grateful. It was a project of mine at the Human Rights Commission. It was the first thing I did when I got hired.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hear stories from people like you and other people all across the country who can now access gender affirming care and have it covered as it should be, it makes me feel happy.
Yeah, and I mean, we just continue to grow from the change made by our elders, and we continue to carve out a better world for those who come after us. And, you know, with Trans History Month, it's so important to remember the people who have changed lives, who've changed the lives for everyone around us, and who've changed the trajectory of our lives. And it makes me wonder, did you have any people who changed the trajectory of your life in terms of being transgender? Any heroes or people who made a difference for you?
Well, there's so many people. I mean, I could name my life partner, Nancy, who never left me, never gave up on me, stayed loving me, continues to love me. That made it a very doable thing. I think people who have affected me are people like James Green and Stephen Thorne and Kyler Brodus, who have all were contemporaries or those who had gone right before me, who kind of showed me the way to find my own path to my own form of activism in this way. You know, I think the heroes are the everyday people, you know, not just people like me or Susan Stryker or anybody else who has a name, but everybody who's in the trenches doing the works. Because I didn't spontaneously generate and start doing stuff. I stood on the shoulders of the giants who came before me, that pre-Stonewall generation that suffered the police raids. And when I came out in 1973, it was still illegal to be gay. So when you see the world change like that, and you become very grateful for the people who suffered much more before us. And what your generation has to deal with now is the backlash to all of the social gains that we did that my generation created, like gender affirming care, like, you know, gender neutral bathrooms, like a lot of things that they're trying to take away from us. It's your job to protect that now, and it's your job to make it better.
Yeah, and that's really important to remember. It's never done alone. It's always done with the support of those around us, with the support of those who came before us. And I just hope that as a community, we continue to keep growing and fighting and never giving more and more space to people who want to take our rights away from us.
Well, there's 3 principles. We cannot fight with each other. So no infighting. We have to get along. Even if we disagree, we still have to get along because backbiting doesn't help. And we don't want to tear each other down. We want to lift each other up because we all rise together. Secondly, allies. No social movement in this country has ever succeeded without the help of allies. Not marriage equality, not racial civil rights, not Indian civil rights, not gay civil rights. None of that has been achieved without allies. Mark Leno was an amazing cisgender gay man who rose to the occasion to get transgender health benefits for us. That's an example of a really good ally. And lastly, we've got to have pressure from both the inside and the outside to create change. So we still need people on the street, carrying signs and megaphones and yelling at the establishment. And we need people on the inside to say, you know, what they're saying is right. And we need to do something about that because we have the ability and the power and the authority. That's how social change happens.
Yeah, it's never done alone. And on that kind of note of uplifting people together, what do you love about being trans?
I feel very, very lucky to, in such a deeply bifurcated, gendered society, to have lived in both worlds and to know what it's like. I appreciate what my partner Nancy has to go through when she's the one doing the contracting with the carpenter, and the carpenter wants to talk to me because I'm the guy. I understand sexism. I appreciate a lot of what, I was a lesbian for 22 years. I appreciate what people go through as lesbianism. So my trans joy is being able to be me, fully me, embraced by everybody. I don't care about anyone's approval at this point in my life or my age. I don't care what pronouns you use with me. And if you think it's going to hurt my feelings calling me lady or she, go at it, because I really don't care. What I care about is continuing to make the world a better place for the 7 generations that come after us. Because this isn't about us, it's about them. And that's what brings me joy, is the thought of doing good things for 7 generations from now, for people I'll never know and never meet, who will never know my name. That brings me joy.
Yeah, trans joy is about breaking down barriers. It's about connecting with people that you may not understand. And I think that's really powerful.
When you put it in the context of Two-Spirit, trans joy is wonderful, because Two-Spirit is actually an indigenous concept that embraces the notion that some of us carry both masculinity and femininity all at the same time, and that's okay. And in fact, it's really a good thing, and it's a part of the hoop that makes it whole. And when you break us trans people away from that hoop, us Two-Spirit people away from that hoop, you're breaking up the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we complete the circuit.
Yeah, and even more generally, I wanted to ask how your identity as a trans person intersects with your Indigenous identity. Are there pieces of your community's history that you carry with you, figures that you look up to?
Well, there's no way that I could tease them out. And the beautiful thing about Blackfeet and Ohlone cultures is we've always understood that there are people who live, who are led by spirit to a different kind of gender expression than is seen as common or average. So in the Blackfeet example, there's a river and a falls named after Running Eagle. And Running Eagle was a female-bodied person who lived in a masculine role. She was a war chief. She was a leader among her people, considered a healer. She had 8 wives, I think, and a lot of horses. So she was very well respected in the community, and her word meant something. And it meant so much to them that even that name and that falls remain named after her. And nobody in the Pakani culture says, oh, that's a wrong person, that's a bad person, they're sinful. No, they've always recognized that we exist. So I can't tease out being trans and being Blackfeet at all, because there's a fall honoring someone like me. And there are so many words in indigenous cultures that explain us. So in the Dene language, it's Nugle. In the Blackfeet language, I can't pronounce it, but it's Running Eagle's name is referred to people like me. And sometimes we're called manly-hearted women. So there's ways that being trans and being indigenous are intrinsic to each other. And a part of the Two-Spirit movement is to return us to our people and remind them of the fact that we used to be a very important part of the culture.
Mm-hmm. And it is a product of colonialism and genocide that those things are forced to be stripped away from each other.
Well, it all goes back to patriarchy, and patriarchy was not an indigenous value.
And that's why it's so important to remember our trans ancestors, our history, our people, because our community dates back way farther than any patriarchy, than any sexism, than any religion that tells us that we're wrong or that we should not exist.
I think that's why it's important for everybody to understand history. As I said before, nothing spontaneously generates. And you're here doing what you're doing because of the actions of what people did hundreds of years before you. The world changed very much when this part of the world got colonized. But we live with what we've been given, and what we do is fight for our rights to be free and equal and a fair part of the community. None of us want to feel like we're alienated or differented. And you mentioned family earlier. So many of us create our own families. We create chosen families because that's what makes us safe. That's what the whole house cultures are built on, is this sense of family. If you see Paris is Burning, you realize that. That's what the Stonewall was about. That's what Compton Cafeteria was about, was a sense of family, and that we fight for our family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our family, our history, our culture, they're all intertwined with each other. And it's hard, but, looking to the past, we can find the answers for our future. Remembering our history is the way forward.
You shouldn't take what's going on now as something to feel defeated about. This is a backlash, and this is an attempt to take over what has been an operating democracy, albeit an imperfect one to say the least, but one that does strive to be aspirational and does strive to improve. And it has in my lifetime, because it used to be against the law to be gay, and now it's not. We used to not be able to get married, and now we can. I used to not be able to have gender affirming care, and now I do. So things change. And when you see things move like this in such a strong direction, it's a swing of a pendulum. And so back to history, what history will teach you is that pendulum has to swing back in the other direction. And it's up to those of us who are still activists to keep pushing it back in that other direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. We're so happy to have you. This was just an amazing episode. We're so grateful for all the work you've done for the trans community and all the work you continue to do. Do you have any final thoughts, things to share?
I do. And it gets down to the work that I do as Holy Old Man Bull, which is somewhat of pastoral care. What I would say is passing on a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of indigenous thought for you. We lose our hope, we lose our joy when we forget our sense of wonder. And we used to be able to look up at the night sky at any given time and see billions of stars that aren't there anymore because they're wiped out by light pollution. We used to hear bird song that we can't hear anymore because it's wiped out by sound pollution. What I want you to remember is never lose your sense of wonder. Never lose your sense of awe about the beauty of this planet that we live on. And remember that you are a part of it, not separated from it. You're a part of it, and an important part of it. So be a good part of it. But let that help you keep your joy as you move forward in the work that you do, is the wonder of the world that we live in, and a chance to make it better for those who come after you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us for this week's episode of our Trans History Month podcast. We'll see you next week, and thank you so much.